drawings that she does on those, but they're not familiar with her large oil paintings of windows and doors. And I saw the exhibit in Little Rock, and it was a beautiful exhibit, so we invited her to do that, to show these paintings here at the Fine Arts Center next month. During the third Friday, she will be talking about how artists can take an inspiration and create a body of work on that inspiration. So in other words, coming up with a theme for your body of works and developing a show out of that. And she's also going to be talking about her particular oil techniques that she uses in those paintings and also on her butterfly paintings. So it'll be a fun evening. That will be the third Friday in October. Tonight, we are talking about heritage artists. We have 3 artists here from the Fine Arts Center who began the Diamond National Competition. And they did that in, I think it was 2004. And they wanted a competition for artists to enter, not just the local Arkansas ones, but nationally. And they had that competition for 1 year, and then one of the founding members of it passed away, and that was Ralph Mike Michaelis. So the following year, the Fine Arts Center decided to award a name in his honor, and that became the Ralph Michaelis Award. That couple months later, the other founding member of the competition passed away, and that was Stanley Rames. And so that year, the Fine Arts Center decided to award not just 1 award, but 3 awards in honor of artists that they called heritage artists, artists that invested their lives in the community. So they did 1 for Ralph Michaelis, 1 for Stanley Rames, and 1 for a living artist, and that's Nina Louton, who's here today. We have artwork from all 3 of these artists on display here at the Fine Arts Center, so be sure to look at that tonight. If you look at their artwork, you're going to see that they have a variety of different styles, but yet they work together, even though one really favored watercolor, one favored oil, and another one favors everything. Nina, she works in ceramics as well as in painting of all mediums. These 3 artists work together in a leadership role. And I would like to talk a little bit about them. They all contributed to this generation of Hot Springs artists. They helped the Fine Arts Center of Hot Springs in its beginning stages of becoming a nonprofit organization, knowing that this would strengthen its ability to encourage the advancement of the arts in Hot Springs in Arkansas. They accepted the responsibility to be leaders in this organization, and they were instrumental in shaping its vision and mission. They also invested their time to encourage young artists to create, develop skills, and to display their artwork. They invested their financial resources in art organizations and in other artists. In other words, they were not only artists for commercial reasons, but they were artists because art was essential to their being, and they had to share it with all. They were art evangelists. And that's what art discussion tonight is going to be about, how to become an evangelist ourselves for art. In other words, passing on your passion for the arts to future generations. So let's look at these 3 artists first, and we're going to listen to Nina Louton first. She's going to come up and tell us about what inspired her to make art and what inspired her to become a part of art organizations.
Well, she said I was going to say what inspired me to do art, and I really can't say anything inspired me. It's just something I had to do. My mother maybe did when I was a child, because if she wanted something, she just did it. And she didn't realize it was art, she considered it work. And I was her partner. As a nice child, the others sometimes didn't want to cooperate, but I always enjoyed doing it with her, so I jumped right in and helped her, and I learned so much, so very much that I still use. Another thing that inspired me is maybe my grandmother, who was a full-blooded Cherokee Indian, and made some of her own dishes, and probably all of her own dishes, because she didn't have very many dishes, to be honest with you. And we were visiting, and the mud was getting all over me, and I was throwing a fit, and my mother said, "That is clay, that's what your grandma makes her dishes out of." And this was her grandmother too, my great-grandmother. And so we made pots out of some of that clay. So that probably greatly impacted my life. As for later, again, art's just something I've always had to do. Even when I was teaching school, I did a lot of art, using it to help my students achieve academically, and it works. I've turned kids on to reading and science and math even with art, and it honestly works. Still, when I teach kids at my summer art camps and at my homeschool classes that I do at my studio, I incorporate all learning as much as I can into what we're doing, because if you don't, you're not a good artist, in my opinion. It's just part of it. You have to know the chemical parts. You have to know the mathematical parts. It's precision and math and everything else. That's enough about me. I want to talk about Mike and Stanley because they greatly inspired me as well. They were both in the Artist Workshop Gallery when I joined. And Mike was just, the main thing I can say about him is not only did he do beautiful, amazing work, but he was a beautiful, amazing man. And everyone in the gallery absolutely loved him. And his friend Stan, when he died, said, "Here is the first donation to start a Ralph Michaelis memorial." And at the time, I had just helped start the diamond exhibit, and Mike and Stan were in that part of that, and I said, how about a diamond exhibit memorial prize every year for that, a Ralph Michaelis award? And Stanley said, that's just great. So a few months later, when he passed, Cynthia's last name, I just remembered. Shannon. Cynthia Shannon said, I want to start one for Stan. And so she pretty much started the finances to move Stanley forward. And there was already some finances available in the Fine Arts Center because Stanley had donated so much of his time, his energies. We did all kinds of things with the Fine Arts Center to help keep it going back then. And truly don't think that it would be still going if it hadn't been for people like Catherine Lundberg and Maureen Ganster, Stanley Rames, Mike Michaelis, people like that who not only gave of their art, they gave of their life. Cynthia Shannon, especially. I don't think many people realize that without Cynthia Shannon, I don't believe there would be an art center, because she was president when the other art center closed, and she just practically tied people's arms behind them and forced them into taking the funds we had available and continuing with it, renting our next place. And I know I wouldn't have done it without her. I'm too shy, and you can tell I'm shy. I'm not one of those people who likes to put myself forward, and if this weren't so important to me, I really would be more shy tonight too. But this is, when I retired from teaching, I looked at the Fine Arts Center, which was practically closed, and those few people who were still trying so hard to keep it alive. And I realized that the Fine Arts Center was very, very, very important to the city of Hot Springs. And I had decided I was going to do something I could do to help Hot Springs. And I believe that the art economy is very important to the survival of Hot Springs. But along the way, I also discovered that it's very important to a lot of churches who love art and cannot go into some galleries because they're afraid of what they might see. It's important to kids who want to learn and don't get enough of that in school. These are things that come through the Fine Arts Center that the community can't get anywhere else. So I feel it's very essential that people choose to not only donate what they can to keep our cultural aspect of civilization going, but also to teach and share the beauty, share the love that's represented in art. And I don't know what else I can say. It's just, it's important for artists to donate their art and have it well documented. It's important for artists to participate with the Fine Arts Center. All of those things keep it going, and it's important that it keeps going to the community.
Cynthia wasn't able to come today, and she was going to be sharing about Stanley Rames. Cynthia was mentored by Stanley Rames. Stanley Rames is a watercolor artist. He does beautiful, just really quick watercolor washes that just, you know, with a little touch will show just detail, even though it's not really there. You know, you look closer, you realize it's just a swoosh of color, but yet it represents something, and when you see it, creates a beautiful picture. We have some samples of those in our windows. And actually what we have is what was left from his legacy of his artwork. In other words, things that have not been sold, and his artwork has been sold even after his death. So it's, what you're seeing is a sample of the leftovers, not the prime stuff. And but one of the things that he did is that he encouraged young artists who were starting out. Cynthia was one of them. Cynthia was doing different types of artwork, but the watercolor became her passion, and she was mentored by Stanley. Today, Cynthia does workshops all over the place. She goes on cruises to Alaska teaching watercolor on the cruise ships.
Can I add that they both helped me a great deal? I didn't say that.
Yes. And helped her too with the skills. So what Stanley did was he taught Cynthia to love her art and to teach it to others. And so she's doing the same thing now. She's teaching young watercolor artists the business about being a watercolor artist. And so that's something that we're going to be talking about later this evening, about how you can encourage other artists too. Next, we're going to have Cherie Smith come up. This is Ralph Michaelis' daughter. I just want to introduce her to everybody. She's shy too. Cherie has been coming in and talking to me about her father, about Mike Michaelis. His name is Ralph Michaelis, but everybody knows him as Mike, so I'm going to call him Mike for the rest of the evening. She brought in a notebook full of his paintings and talking about saying, oh, I remember this painting, you know, seeing it. She doesn't know where it is, because it's sold, has a little red dot on it. But she, can tell me, I said, oh, that's Gulf of Gorge. I remember him painting this. Has no idea where that painting is now. And looking through it and just talking about each one. But she also shared a little something about her childhood, her growing up. Not just about her father, but her mother. And can you tell them a little bit about what you told me about how you remember them always?
I remember, we lived overseas a lot, and I remember we were in Austria. I was just a squirt, and art was, for my mom and dad both, was their way of relaxation. And my mother was a beautiful oil painter, and why she discontinued, I don't really know, except someone needed to be a critic. That was what I always heard, and she gave it up. But that was their way on weekends to covered with sheets, set up the easels, paints came out, and they would be in the same room doing different things, still art. So I can remember this as far back as my childhood. Everywhere we ever lived, that was weekend. They were both gourmet cooks that, someone would decide who's going to cook, and the rest of the day, the weekends were art, charcoal, pen and ink, oils. They got me going a little bit, but not for long. And I just didn't have the gift, but I was fascinated by how it was all put together. And Daddy's whole attitude was very cavalier. For those who knew him, he would do a little touch here and a little touch there. And he wore his old shirts, and boy, he would just create the most incredible things put together. He taught my children when they would come to visit. He would take them aside and try to pull out of them what it is they wanted to paint, and he would make them stand there with him, and he would make them work on the sketch or choose the color. But he just loved what he did, and he wanted everyone else to participate in, I believe, the joy of the creation. You're talking about creating it and feeling good about what you're doing, and feeling good that they want to do that. My children still talk about Grandpa helping them to do artwork when they come to visit.
Through his legacy, he is still making them do that. He's still.
Well, yeah, he is.
He
You know,
is.
I kept, because my parents were artists, as my children were very young, and drawing kind of crude drawings of dogs and cats, just basic, the ears, the feet, the whole thing. I put all that away. I have papers tucked here and there in the photo albums of my children's work when they thought they were, not much, but if Daddy was around, they would make an effort, and I kept all that. And I give it to them when I see them, which isn't very often. I said, here, you did this. They read poetry, too. Now, my father, other than his art, was a linguist. I mean, those of you who knew him, boy, he mastered the English language and could tell a story that puts you right there. We're face to face, but he just drew you in with his knowledge of words and how to use them, crossword puzzles and all this stuff, which I am now. I'm aficionado. Also, now I'm a wordy person too. But he, as long as I can remember, they used to do copper work. I don't even know if people do copper work anymore. They get the sheets of copper, and there was a rounded tool, and they would push into the copper, and then you would turn the picture around, and you would have like three-dimensional copper stuff. I don't know where any of that went, but I remember in Austria as a very young child, fascinated with this turnaround artwork. What they would, I don't know what it was. I don't. It had to have been a tool of some kind to push the copper. And my mother did a lion in a tree, and it's distinct in my mind where it is. There was a fire here in Hot Springs. They came here in the mid-'70s, and there was a fire up in the shed where their house was, and a lot of the paintings that I watched being painted as a child were lost in that fire. But that book that Donna has refreshed a lot of memory for me of places. I know where that place was. I got a letter here not long ago from a guy overseas who wanted to know where these pictures were from.
And we got, at the Fine Arts
Yeah.
Center, had someone call and ask where he could find more of Mike's paintings.
I communicated with him.
Yeah.
I said, you know, short of what I have and what my brother has and what a few individuals have, I don't know where anything of any volume is. My cousin in California now, he has some. So my dad instituted a love of art in him. He's a lawyer, but that was his relaxation, his art. So it's still happening. It's still out there, you know. But you gotta start. You gotta push. You gotta push somebody. And Nina is a pusher.
I am.
You are. I know with your artwork and your teaching and
Some
sons
of
of
Mike's
teaching.
techniques are going right into new
Thank you. The point that I want to make with this is that, you know, she said she does not create art herself, but she does have a love of art, and that comes from her father, and how he invested his life in her life, and his passion for art with her. So we're going to be talking about that too in our roundtable part. But before we do that, I do want to read from Mike's journal. Mike Michaelis not only made art, but he talked about art and wrote about art. So we have some history about why he paints, where he got his inspiration, and also we have records of how he was involved in hot springs. This is the part from his journals that, by the way, his journal is called Bits and Pieces from a Good Life. And it's the part that he says he's talking about his art mentor, the one who got him excited about doing art, while he was living in Ireland from 1969 to 1976. A Welsh artist by the name of Clee came to Ballylickey and bought a house just across the street from the grocery store. I met him shortly after, and when I evinced some interest in his paintings, he invited me to visit with him while he painted in the studio. He was a man about 50 years old and married to a young French woman about half his age. He painted rapidly, always on 2 feet by 3 feet masonite panels, and mostly landscapes. When he accumulated a stack of some 50 or 60 paintings, he would fly them to the States, hawk them while putting on painting demonstrations in big department stores. He made good money. After I had visited him a couple of times in the studio, he provided me with paints and an easel and gave me instructions on the house. That engendered a long-lasting desire to paint as well. Clee talked incessantly. When he was not talking to me, he talked to himself, remarking most profanely about the suitability of every brushstroke and of the developing painting. He had an old clunker of a boat with a diesel engine from which we fished for mackerel in the bay. We stayed with him overnight on one of our return trips to Ireland. And then later he writes about his involvement with the art scene in Hot Springs. He lived here from 1976 to 2005. Our friends George and Lib Snyder, both natives of Arkansas, spent a lot of time and effort to make our transition into Hot Springs smooth and enjoyable. George was into real estate and knew everyone, almost, in the city. Knowing of my interest in art, indeed, we essayed a few art lessons together in a station in Wiesbaden, Germany.
That's where the sketching started, the pen and inks.
And
On
what
Sunday
city was it?
morning with a pot of coffee, as a child, watching this great, huge German man teach pen and ink. It was fascinating. Sunday morning.
So then they introduced me to the local Fine Arts Center, featuring an exhibition of local hot spring artists. I was suitably impressed and determined at that time to include painting into my local activities. Little did I realize just how much of my time it would command over the coming years. The Art Center was located in what at one time had been a rolling skating rink on Wilmington Avenue. This very large Quonset hut-type wooden structure containing galleries and meeting spaces, as well as a versatile performing art theater complete with stage, dressing rooms, and property and costume rooms, a dance studio, and a large, well-lighted visual arts studio. The visual arts were run by an organization called Southern Artists Association. Aspiring artists had to submit samples of their work to jury for membership. I applied and was accepted in 1977. Southern Artists Association members met weekly in the painting studio for workshops and mutual instruction and critiques. Gallery shows were changed monthly. Over the years, I had several one-man shows there. After a couple of years, the Southern Artists Association joined with the Performing Arts Group to establish the Hot Springs Fine Arts Center, a nonprofit civic organization with a full-time director. I became a member of the board of directors and remained so until my resignation in 1992. Along about 1985, we began looking for a more suitable location and facility as the old rink was beginning to creak and groan. The roof leaked and its location was too remote from the city's interest centers. We offered it for sale for $60,000 and finally accepted a bid for $15,000 from a religious group who wanted to turn it into a church. Alas, before the contract was signed, a heavy snowstorm deposited a great weight on the roof, and half the building collapsed. The church group still wanted the property and got it for about $10,000 under a new contract. A local neurologist offered the center a 5-year rent-free building on Central Avenue, and we were saved. One of our board members was an insurance executive who investigated the policy we carried on the old property. She was able to get a settlement of about $165,000 for that old clunker, which earlier on we were happy with this prospect of unloading for $15,000. With this windfall and money raised in other ways, the Art Center was able to buy the old hotel in the business section of the city for a future center, which they later on sold because it was too old to fix up. I also joined a splinter art group who had, before my arrival, detached themselves from the Southern Artists Association because of a rift over exhibition policies. This was called the Traditional Art Guild. With about 30 members, I acted as a mediator between this group and the Art Center. Eventually, about 20 members of this new group formed a cooperative to rent a gallery in downtown Hot Springs to promote local artists and their work. Our place is called Artist Workshop. Classes are offered and members paint in the gallery during their on-duty business hours. Hot Springs has finally recognized the arts and is well on the way to becoming an art center for this section of the country. Our workshop provides assured space for displaying each member's work. We also display in various businesses throughout the area. So at this point, I want us to kind of reflect on these 3 artists that we just talked about and what we heard about their testimonies, their life, what they did. What I noticed looking at them is that there's 3 ways that we can develop a passion for the arts in our community. One is we have to develop our own art. We need to make sure it grows. And so we're going to spend the first part of our round table discussion talking about ways that we can develop your own art, your own skill, and your own passion for the arts. The second was that I noticed that they invested time and money in developing the other artists and art organizations. And so then we'll spend time about how you as an artist can do the same thing. And then the last thing is that they had some form of estate planning, and we need to be thinking about that too. Some places they kind of fell, they didn't go quite far enough. They did go far enough to start up Mike did, and having money set aside to start a trust fund for supporting art groups, and that's what Mark Michaelis, his son, mans, and that's where we get our prize money for the Diamond exhibition. Every year he contributes, and Cherie contributes her own funds, so we can give out awards for that competition every year. Thank you. But what happened is that, like she was telling us earlier, she doesn't know where some of the artwork is. She doesn't know who collected his artwork, what, be able to tell people who are interested where they can see it displayed. She has no idea. So we're gonna be talking about record keeping tonight as well, and how we can make sure that people know where our artwork is, and making sure it goes to people that, you know, what you have left is, you know, it goes to the people you want it to go to, and help the people you want to help. So, I think for this part, we're gonna take a break, then we're gonna form into a circle to be a round table so we can discuss back and forth these topics. Thank you. So, refill. And then,